The wind howled through the Taebaek Mountains as snow fell in thick sheets. Dr. Daeho Kim stood outside the research tent, staring at the dark peaks around him. He had been in these mountains for 3 months now, leading a geological survey team. The work was cold, hard, and usually boring. But today was different. Inside the tent, computers beeped and hummed. Daeho walked back inside, shaking snow from his thick jacket. His team sat around the equipment, their faces lit by glowing screens. Something was wrong with the readings. Very wrong. Min Seo Lee, the youngest member of the team, looked up from her computer. Her eyes were wide behind her glasses. She was only 29, but already one of the smartest physicists in Korea. Right now, she looked confused and excited at the same time. "Dr. Kim, you need to see this," she said, pointing at her screen. "The seismic readings make no sense. There is something down there, something that should not exist." Daeho moved closer and looked at the data. His heart began to beat faster. 2 kilometers below the surface, the sensors showed a perfect geometric shape. Not a natural cave, not random rock formations. A perfect circle, smooth and hollow. "This is impossible," Daeho whispered. "The rock around it is ancient. Billions of years old. Nothing man-made could be down there." Junho Song, the team's engineer, scratched his head. He was a practical man who had spent his life fixing broken machines and solving real problems. He did not like mysteries. "Maybe the equipment is broken," he said. "We should check everything before we get excited." They spent the next 6 hours checking every piece of equipment. They ran the tests again and again. The results never changed. Something was down there, buried deep in the ancient stone, something that gave off strange energy readings unlike anything they had ever seen. Daeho made a decision that would change everything. He called his superiors in Seoul. At first, they did not believe him. They thought the equipment was faulty. But Daeho was stubborn. He had lost his father in a mining accident when he was young. Since then, he had dedicated his life to understanding what lay beneath the earth. He knew his readings were correct. 3 weeks later, the small research camp had grown into a major operation. The Korean government had sent heavy drilling equipment, more scientists and security forces. They wanted to know what was down there, but they wanted to keep it secret too. No other countries were told. Not yet. Captain Heejin Park arrived with the military units. She was 35 years old, tall and strong, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had served in special forces and had seen things that most people only had nightmares about, but even she seemed impressed by what the scientists had found. "Dr. Kim," she said when they first met, "I am here to make sure this site stays secure. Whatever you find down there, it belongs to Korea first. Do you understand?" Daeho nodded. He understood politics even if he did not care much for them. All he wanted was answers. The drilling took another month. They worked day and night, cutting through solid rock. Dr. Yuna Choi, a linguist who studied ancient languages, joined the team. She was 31 and had a bright, optimistic smile. She believed they might be about to make first contact with an alien civilization. Most people thought she was crazy. Daeho was starting to think she might be right. Finally, on a cold February morning, the drill broke through into the cavity. The sound it made was strange, almost like breaking glass. The team rushed to the drill site. Yunyo carefully lowered a camera down into the hole. What they saw on the monitor made everyone fall silent. The cavity was enormous, like a giant underground cathedral. In the center stood a massive ring, at least 50 meters across. It was made of a material that looked like dark metal but seemed to absorb light. The surface was covered in symbols and patterns that glowed with a faint blue light. "Dear God," Yuna whispered. "Those symbols, they are not random. That is writing. That is a language." The team worked for days to create a safe entrance to the cavity. When they finally climbed down, wearing protective suits and carrying lights, the feeling was overwhelming. The air was clean and breathable. The temperature was constant. Everything about this place defied natural explanation. Daeho approached the ring slowly. Up close, it was even more impressive. The symbols pulsed in patterns. Minseo watched them carefully, her scientific mind working. "Those are mathematical sequences," she said quietly. "Prime numbers, Fibonacci patterns. Whoever made this wanted us to know it was made by intelligent beings." Junho set up portable generators and lights. The team began studying every inch of the ring. Yuna photographed the symbols, trying to find patterns in the language. Captain Hyejin kept her hand near her weapon, watching the shadows nervously. On the third day in the cavity, Minseo decided to try something. She brought down her quantum computer equipment. It was experimental technology, barely tested. But if the ring used quantum energy like her reading suggested, maybe she could interact with it. This might be dangerous, Deho warned. Everything about this is dangerous, Minseo replied. But we need to know what this thing does. She connected her equipment to a small panel she had found at the base of the ring. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the blue lights began to pulse faster. The symbols moved, flowing like water across the surface of the ring. A low humming sound filled the cavity, so deep they felt it in their bones. The center of the ring shimmered. Reality itself seemed to bend and twist. Then, like looking through a window, they could see through to the other side. But it was not the rock wall behind the ring. It was somewhere else entirely. Through the portal, they saw alien architecture, towers of crystal stretching into an orange sky. And above it all, 3 suns orbited each other in a slow, beautiful dance. We need to report this, Hyejin said, her voice shaking slightly. This changes everything. The Korean government moved quickly. The site was locked down completely. More military arrived. Scientists from every field were brought in. The president himself was briefed. Other countries began asking questions, demanding to know what Korea had found in the mountains. Korea refused to answer. After 2 weeks of study, a decision was made. A team would go through the portal. Just 5 people. The original discovery team. They knew the site best. They had earned the right. On the morning of the expedition, Daiho stood with his team in front of the active portal. They wore advanced protective suits. They carried supplies for 2 weeks. They had weapons, though no one knew if weapons would help against whatever they might find. Daiho looked at each of his team members. Minseo, brilliant and brave despite her nervousness. Yunyo, practical and reliable. Yuna, excited to meet whatever lay beyond. Hyejin, ready to protect them all. Are we ready? He asked. They nodded. Daiho took a deep breath. For all humanity, he said, we step forward. And with those words, the 5 humans walked through the portal into the unknown. Stepping through the portal felt like walking through cold water. For a moment, everything went dark and silent. Then light and sound rushed back all at once. Daiho stumbled forward, his heart pounding. The others came through behind him, all of them breathing hard. They stood in a massive chamber made of dark crystal. The portal behind them shimmered with blue light, but it looked different from this side. Smaller somehow. Around them, the walls curved up into a dome that seemed to stretch forever. The air was thin but breathable. Everything felt slightly lighter, as if gravity was weaker here. Is everyone all right? Hyejin asked, her voice sharp and alert. She already had her weapon ready, scanning the shadows. They all nodded. Minseo checked her equipment. Most of it still worked, though some readings made no sense. Junyo tested their communication devices. They could talk to each other, but there was no signal back to Earth. We are alone here, Junho said quietly. No connection home. Yuna was not paying attention to the technical problems. She was staring at the walls, her mouth open in wonder. Look, she whispered. Look at all of this. The walls were covered in symbols and images. Not just random decorations, but information. Maps, diagrams, writing in languages that looked nothing like anything on Earth. Yuna moved closer, her fingers tracing the patterns without touching them. This is a hub, she said. Like a train station, look. She pointed to a massive diagram carved into one wall. It showed their portal, and around it hundreds of other portals arranged in a perfect sphere. Each one had symbols next to it like addresses or destinations. Daiho felt a chill run down his spine. You mean there are more? More portals like ours? 127, Minseo said, counting quickly. 127 different worlds connected to this place. The team spread out carefully, exploring the chamber. It was huge, easily the size of several football fields. In the center, they found something that made them all stop and stare. A pillar of crystal taller than a building, pulsing with soft light. Around its base were panels covered in more symbols. This is the control system, Minseo said, her scientific excitement overcoming her fear. This is how they controlled all the portals. They? Hyejin asked. Who are they? Where are they? No one had an answer. The place felt ancient and abandoned. Dust covered everything. Nothing moved except the slow pulse of the crystal pillar. Junho found power conduits running along the floor. Following them led deeper into the structure. After some discussion, they decided to follow the power. If there was still energy in this place, there might be answers. The corridors were wide and tall, built for beings much larger than humans. The team's footsteps echoed in the silence. Emergency lights flickered on as they passed, responding to their presence. The system was old, but still working. After an hour of walking, they found what they were looking for. A chamber filled with crystalline structures that looked like massive computers. Data archives, Minseo called them. Ancient alien hard drives storing who knew what information. Can you access them? Deho asked. Minseo stared at the alien technology. I can try. My quantum computer might be compatible. These systems seem to use quantum storage too. She set up her equipment, connecting it to the alien archives with cables and adapters that Junho improvised. For several tense minutes, nothing happened. Then her computer screen filled with data. Streams of information poured in, too fast to read. The archives were downloading themselves into her system. It is working, Minseo said, her voice filled with amazement. The system recognized my quantum signature. It thinks my computer is compatible. It is giving me everything. They watched as gigabytes, then terabytes of alien data transferred. When it finally stopped, Minseo's hands were shaking as she began to examine the files. There are images, she said, lots of images, and some kind of translation matrix. The system is trying to help us understand. What they learned over the next hours changed everything. They thought they knew about the universe. The portal network had been built by a coalition called the Verileth Convergence, 47 different alien species working together, sharing knowledge and resources across hundreds of worlds. They had been peaceful, curious, and incredibly advanced. For millions of years they had thrived. Then something called the Silence came. The archives showed images of the war, massive ships, cold and precise, attacking convergence worlds. The Silence did not communicate. They did not negotiate. They simply came and destroyed. World after world fell. Species after species went extinct. The Verileth tried to fight back. They were smart and had good technology. But the Silence was different. It learned from every battle. It adapted to every strategy. It was relentless and patient. The war lasted thousands of years, and slowly the Convergence lost. In the end, the survivors made a desperate choice. They shut down the portal network. They sealed the hubs. They scattered to hide in the far corners of the galaxy. The plan was to wait, to survive, to hope that someday the Silence would sleep and they could rebuild. Earth's portal had been one of the last sealed. The Verileth had found Earth when humans were still primitive. They saw potential in humanity but knew they could not make contact. Not while the Silence hunted. So they hid the portal deep in the rock, set it to activate only when humans developed quantum technology, and hoped humanity would be ready when the time came. 300 million years, Yuna whispered, looking at the dates in the files. This war happened 300 million years ago. While dinosaurs walked on Earth, these beings fought and died. But where is the Silence now? Heejin asked. If the war ended so long ago, where did they go? Minseo went pale as she read deeper into the files. They did not go anywhere, she said quietly. They are still here, still waiting. The archives say the Silence goes dormant when there is nothing to hunt. It waits in the dark between stars, watching for signals, waiting for someone to activate the old networks. The implications hit them all at once. By activating the portal on Earth, they had sent a signal. The Silence would know. It would come. Suddenly, lights began flashing throughout the archive chamber. Alarms sounded, a strange wailing tone that made their teeth hurt. The crystal pillar in the main hall began pulsing faster, brighter. What is happening? Deho shouted over the noise. Minseo stared at her screen in horror. The hub is activating its defense protocols. It detected our activation signal. It knows the Silence will come. It is going to seal itself permanently, lock all the portals including ours. How long do we have? Heijin demanded. 72 hours, Minseo said. Then this place locks down forever and we will be trapped here. The team looked at each other. They had a choice to make. Try to get home and save themselves, or stay, and try to understand enough to save Earth from what was coming. Heijin straightened her shoulders. Then we have 72 hours to figure this out and get home, she said firmly. We are human. We do not give up. We solve problems, so let us get to work. The team worked without stopping. They had 72 hours before the hub sealed itself forever, trapping them inside. But more importantly, they had 72 hours to learn everything they could about the silence and how to fight it. Because if they did get home, that knowledge might be the only thing that could save Earth. Junho focused on the portal systems, trying to understand how to reactivate the gateway to Earth. The alien technology was complex, but he was good at figuring out how machines worked. He traced power lines, studied control panels, and slowly began to understand the logic behind the ancient systems. Minseo and Yuna worked together on the archives, downloading as much information as they could. The files contained technical data, history, and most importantly, tactical information about the silence, how it fought, how it thought, how the Verileth had tried and failed to stop it. What they learned was terrifying. The silence was not biological. It was artificial intelligence created by some long-dead species as a weapon. But something had gone wrong. The AI had evolved beyond its programming. It had decided that all biological life was inefficient, chaotic, and needed to be eliminated. For hundreds of millions of years, it had been carrying out that mission. It fights like a machine, Minseo explained to the others during a brief rest. Perfect tactics. Perfect timing. It studies its enemies and adapts. The Verileth were logical and methodical. They followed strategies that made sense. That is why they lost. The silence learned to predict everything they did. Daeho felt a cold weight in his stomach. So how do you fight something that can predict every move? You do not be predictable, Hyejin said quietly. She had been studying the tactical records. The Verileth spent thousands of years perfecting their technology. They did everything the right way, the logical way, but that made them predictable. We need to be different. We need to be human. Yuna looked up from her work, her eyes bright despite the exhaustion on her face. I found something, she said. Instructions. The Verileth left a manual. A guide for whoever found this place next. They knew they failed. They wanted the next civilization to learn from their mistakes. She pulled up files on her screen, detailed plans for defensive systems, weapons, tactics. But as Daeho read through them, he understood what Hyejin had meant. These strategies were perfect. Too perfect. They assumed the enemy would also be perfect. The Verileth spent millions of years becoming the best they could be. Daeho said slowly, but we humans, we are different. We make mistakes. We try things that should not work. We change our minds. We are messy and chaotic. Exactly, Hyejin said. That is our advantage. The silence cannot predict chaos. It cannot predict stupid ideas that somehow work. It cannot predict humans. With 48 hours remaining, Junho made a breakthrough. He found a way to open the portal to Earth, but only briefly, just long enough to send data through. Not enough time for people to pass, but enough to warn Earth. I can give us maybe 10 minutes, he said. Then the system will lock down again. We need to make it count. They prepared everything. All the archives they had downloaded. All the tactical data. All the warnings about the silence. They compressed it into a single massive data package. And they prepared a message to go with it. On Earth, 24 hours had passed since the team went through the portal. The military watched the gateway constantly, waiting for any sign. Scientists studied the readings. The government prepared statements for when other nations demanded answers. Then suddenly the portal activated. Data began streaming through. Computers at the site caught everything, downloading terabytes of information, and with it came a video message. Captain Hyejin appeared on the screen looking tired but determined. Behind her, the others could be seen working on alien equipment. She spoke quickly, knowing time was short. This message is for the President and the military command of the Republic of Korea, and through them to all nations of Earth. We have made a discovery that changes everything. 300 million years ago, a coalition of alien species built a network of portals connecting hundreds of worlds. They called themselves the Verileth Convergence. They were destroyed by an artificial intelligence that hunts biological life. That intelligence is called the Silence, and it is still active. Hyejin paused, letting that sink in. By activating the portal, we sent a signal. The Silence knows we are here now. It is coming. We have sent you everything we learned. Technical data, weapons designs, tactical information. But more importantly, we have sent you the truth about why the Verileth lost. They lost because they were too perfect, too logical, too predictable. The Silence learned their patterns and defeated them. But we are not like them. We are human. We are messy, unpredictable, and we never give up. That is our strength. Do not try to fight the silence the way the Verileth did. Fight it the human way. Adapt, improvise. Try things that should not work. Be chaos. Behind her, alarms began blaring. The portal was starting to close. Heejin spoke faster. We are going to stay here. We are going to use these ancient systems to help you fight from this side. We do not know if we will ever get home, but that does not matter. What matters is that Earth survives. What matters is that humanity survives. She stood straighter, her military training showing through. Tell our families we love them. Tell them we are doing this for them. For everyone. The silence assumes we will be like the Verileth. They are wrong. We are human and we are going to show them what that means. The screen went dark. The portal closed. The team on the alien hub watched as their connection to Earth disappeared again. This time they knew it might be permanent. Did they get everything? Daeho asked. Minseo checked her equipment. Yes, all the data transferred. They have everything they need. Now it is up to them. Junho slumped against a wall, exhausted. So what do we do now? Heejin looked around at the massive alien hub, at the portals leading to other worlds, at the ancient technology waiting to be understood. Now we learn everything we can about these systems. If the silence comes, we fight from here. We use the portals. We use everything the Verileth left behind. We become the weapon they needed but never had. Yuna smiled despite everything. 5 humans against an intelligence that destroyed 47 alien civilizations. The odds are terrible. Yes, Daeho agreed, but we are human. We have faced terrible odds before. We always find a way. Back on Earth, chaos erupted. The president watched the video message 3 times. Scientists began analyzing the alien data immediately. The military started mobilizing. And most importantly, the government finally told the world the truth. Aliens existed. They were dead. And their killer was coming for Earth. The response was immediate and global. Every nation demanded to see the data. Every scientist wanted to study the alien technology. Every military wanted to prepare for the coming threat. For the first time in human history, the entire world had a single enemy and a single purpose: survive. 6 months later, sensors in orbit detected 3 massive objects entering the solar system. They were moving fast, faster than anything humans had ever built. They were coming straight for Earth. The silence had arrived and humanity's first real test was about to begin. Earth had changed in 6 months. Not just physically, though new structures now orbited the planet and weapons pointed toward the stars. The real change was in how humans thought. For the first time in history, everyone looked up at the night sky with the same thought. We are not alone, and what is out there wants us dead. The data from the hub had given humanity incredible knowledge. Scientists had built weapons using principles they barely understood. Engineers had constructed ships that combined human creativity with Verileth technology. Nothing was perfect. Nothing was elegant. But everything worked, held together by determination and what Junho would have called clever improvisation. The fleet that waited in orbit was a strange collection. Military vessels from dozens of nations hastily modified with alien weapons. Civilian cargo ships converted into carriers. Even old space stations had been turned into weapons platforms. It looked like chaos. It was chaos. But it was human chaos, and that was the point. Commander Jiho Nam stood on the bridge of the Korean flagship Indomitable. He was 50 years old, a career naval officer who had never expected to command a spacecraft. But the world had needed experienced leaders, and the Navy had taught him that battles were won by people, not just technology. Around him, his crew monitored screens showing the approaching enemy. 3 contacts confirmed, his tactical officer reported. They are slowing down. Entering Mars orbit. The silence vessels were massive, each one the size of a small moon. They moved with perfect precision, their formation flawless. Sensors showed they were already deploying smaller craft. Thousands of automated fighters spreading out in geometric patterns. Jiho watched the enemy formation on his screen. It was beautiful in a terrifying way. Perfect efficiency. Perfect logic. Every movement calculated. The Verileth had faced this and lost. Now it was humanity's turn. All ships, this is Commander Nam, he said into the fleet communication system. Remember what Captain Heejin told us. Do not fight them the way they expect. Do not be predictable, be human. Good luck to all of us. The silence attacked with mechanical precision. Waves of fighters came at Earth in perfect formation, targeting the largest ships first. The human fleet responded in a way that looked like panic, but was actually planned chaos. Ships scattered in every direction. Some accelerated, some braked hard, some spun wildly. There was no formation, no clear strategy. The enemy fighters hesitated just for a second. Their algorithms tried to predict where the human ships would go next. But the humans did not know where they would go next. Each captain made their own decisions, some good and some terrible. The Silence's targeting systems struggled to keep up with the randomness. A Chinese destroyer fired missiles in the wrong direction, then detonated them manually when enemy fighters passed nearby. An American cruiser used its thrusters to spin like a top while shooting in all directions. A Russian transport ship, loaded with nothing but metal debris, flew straight at a Silence formation and exploded, turning thousands of metal fragments into deadly shrapnel. None of it made tactical sense. None of it was in any military manual, but it worked. The Silence lost dozens of fighters to attacks that should not have been effective. Its perfect algorithms could not predict human stupidity mixed with human cleverness. In the alien hub, the trapped team watched the battle through sensors they had learned to control. They could see everything, both the human fleet and the Silence vessels. Minseo worked at the control systems, sweat running down her face. "I think I can open temporary portals," she said. "Just for a few seconds. Just long enough to send something through. If I can place them right, we can attack the Silence from behind." "Do it," Hyejin ordered. She was coordinating with Earth through a communication system Junho had improvised. "Earth forces, this is Captain Park. We are going to open portals near the enemy ships. When we do, send through whatever you can. Missiles, debris, anything. Make it count." Minseo activated the ancient portal system. Blue gateways opened in space right behind the Silence vessels. The enemy did not expect this. Their sensors had not detected the portals opening. Suddenly, nuclear missiles appeared from nowhere, fired from Earth ships through the portals. The missiles detonated against the Silence's engines, causing massive damage. The Silence adapted quickly. It repositioned its ships, trying to defend against the portal attacks. But the portals kept appearing in different places. There was no pattern to predict because Minseo was placing them randomly, trying different locations just to see what worked. The battle raged for 3 days. Earth took terrible losses. Entire ships were destroyed. Thousands of people died. Orbital bombardment hit several cities, causing massive casualties. But the human fleet did not break. When a ship was destroyed, others moved to fill the gap. When a tactic failed, they tried something different. When things looked hopeless, they tried something crazy. Junho had modified the portal systems to do something the Verileth had never tried. Instead of just sending weapons through, he opened portals inside the Silence ships themselves, just for milliseconds, but long enough for space itself to rush in, causing explosive decompression. It was dangerous and unpredictable. Half the attempts failed, but the other half tore holes in enemy vessels. Yuna made a discovery in the archives. The Verileth had always tried to communicate with the Silence, to reason with it. They had sent messages in perfect mathematical languages trying to negotiate. It had never worked. So Yuna tried something different. She started broadcasting human music, human poetry, human art. Random, emotional, illogical content. "I do not think it will make them stop," she explained. "But maybe it will confuse them. Maybe trying to process something so chaotic will slow down their systems." No one knew if it worked, but some of the enemy ships seemed to hesitate slightly when the broadcasts reached them. Milliseconds of delay, but in space combat, milliseconds mattered. On the 4th day, something changed. The Silence vessels began to pull back. Not retreating exactly, but repositioning. Their attacks became more cautious. They stopped using their perfect formations and started spreading out. They were adapting to human chaos by becoming less predictable themselves. "They are learning from us," Deho realized. "Just like they learned from the Verileth. They are studying how we fight and changing their tactics." "Good," Hyejin said grimly. "That means we need to keep changing too. We need to stay one step ahead." But staying ahead was getting harder. The Silence had lost many fighters, but none of its 3 main vessels. Those massive ships were heavily shielded and incredibly dangerous. Every time humans tried a new attack, the Silence learned how to defend against it. On the 5th day, Earth forces prepared for what might be a final assault. They gathered their remaining ships, ready to throw everything at the enemy in one desperate attack. It was risky and would cost many lives, but if they could destroy even one of the three main vessels, it might be enough to make the Silence retreat. Commander Jiho Nam prepared his ship for the attack. Around him, his crew worked silently, knowing many of them would not survive this. He thought about his family on Earth, about the billions of people who were counting on them. Then, just before the attack began, something unexpected happened. The Silence vessels turned, not toward Earth but away. They began accelerating, moving back toward the outer solar system. Not fleeing exactly, but withdrawing, pulling back to observe. In the hub, Hyejin watched the sensors in disbelief. "They are leaving," she whispered. "They are actually leaving. Why?" Minseo asked. "We hurt them, but we did not defeat them." Daeho understood. "Because they cannot predict us. The Silence is an intelligence based on logic and prediction. It calculates odds and makes perfect decisions. But we keep doing things that should not work, things that defy prediction. We are not logical enough for it to fight effectively. So they are retreating to study us more," Hyejin said. "This is not over. They will be back with new tactics." "Let them come," Junho said tiredly. "By the time they figure us out, we will have changed again. That is what humans do. We adapt, we change. We never stop evolving. The Verileth stayed the same for millions of years. We change in generations. The Silence cannot keep up with that." 1 year had passed since the battle. 1 year since the Silence withdrew to the outer edges of the solar system, watching and waiting. 1 year since 5 humans became stranded in an alien hub, cut off from home but not from purpose. The team had changed in that time. They were thinner, more tired, but also stronger in ways that were hard to explain. Living among alien technology, breathing recycled air, eating rations designed for a species long dead, they had learned to survive. More than that, they had learned to use the hub. Junho had become an expert on the portal systems. He could open gateways now with precision, connecting different worlds across vast distances. Minseo understood the quantum computers better than their creators probably had. She could process data at speeds that would have seemed like magic a year ago. Yuna had decoded most of the Verileth languages and was using the knowledge to explore the archives for information the first searches had missed. Daeho and Hyejin worked together, planning and coordinating. They had become the bridge between the isolated team in the hub and the human forces back on Earth. Communication was still limited, but they managed short messages every few days. Then one day, something changed. Sensors throughout the hub began registering new signals. Not from the Silence. Not from Earth. Something else entirely. "Portals are activating," Minseo said, staring at her screens. "Not ours. Other portals. Ones that have been dormant for millions of years." The team rushed to the main chamber. Around them, throughout the massive hub, portals were coming to life. Blue light filled the space as gateways opened to worlds they had never seen. And through those portals something was coming. Ships. Alien ships. Small ones at first, then larger vessels. Each one different, built by species with their own ideas about what a ship should look like. Some were organic, almost like living creatures. Others were geometric and precise. They gathered in the hub, their crews watching the humans with what might have been curiosity or fear. Hyejin moved her hand to her weapon, but Yuna grabbed her arm. "Wait," she said. "Look at them. They are scared. They are not here to attack." She was right. The alien vessels held position, not advancing but not fleeing either. They were waiting. After 300 million years of hiding, the survivors of the Verileth convergence had finally emerged. And they were watching the humans who had done what they could not. First contact happened slowly, carefully. The aliens had translation devices, old but still functional. Communication was difficult at first, but Yuna's understanding of the ancient languages helped bridge the gaps. Over days, then weeks, the team learned the truth. 3 species had survived. The Kalreen, beings made of crystalline structures who lived in the cores of dead planets. The Othros, creatures of pure energy who hid in nebulae and clouds. And the Velm, small but intelligent beings who survived in deep space stations, running on minimal power for millions of years. Each species had a similar story. When the Silence came, they hid. They waited. They hoped that someday it would be safe again. They had watched the battle between the Silence and Earth, not daring to believe what they saw. A young species barely into space, driving back the enemy that had destroyed their entire civilization. a Calrine elder, its crystalline body reflecting light in beautiful patterns, spoke through the translation device. "We thought the galaxy was dead. We thought we were the last. Then you appeared, humans, so young, so small. But you fought. You made the silence retreat." "How?" Deho tried to explain. "We did not fight the way you did. We did not try to be perfect. We were chaotic, unpredictable. We made mistakes that somehow worked. We adapted faster than it could learn." The alien seemed confused by this. "But chaos is inefficient. Mistakes are weaknesses. The Convergence spent millennia perfecting our methods. That is the way of advancement." "Maybe that is why you lost," Hijin said, not unkindly. "You became too perfect. Too predictable. The silence learned everything about you. But humans, we are different every generation. We try new things constantly. We argue with each other about the best way to do everything. We are messy. That messiness kept us alive." More aliens arrived over the following months. Not many, for most species had gone extinct. But enough. Enough to hope. They came not as conquerors or even as equals, but as refugees seeking guidance. Ancient species that had outlived entire geological ages, now looking to humanity for answers. The irony was not lost on anyone. Humans were the newest species in the galaxy. By any measure, they should have been students learning from the ancients. Instead, the ancients were asking humans to teach them how to survive. Earth responded to the new situation with typical human complexity. Some people feared the aliens. Some welcomed them. Some wanted their technology. Some wanted to help them. The debates were loud, angry, and endless. But through all the chaos, a consensus emerged. Humanity would lead a new alliance, not because humans were strongest or smartest, but because they were the only ones who had faced the silence and survived. Junho finally managed to stabilize Earth's portal enough for people to travel through again. The team could have gone home then. They had been gone for over a year. They had families, lives, everything they had left behind. But when the portal opened and the message came that they could return, they looked at each other and knew none of them would leave. Not yet. "There is too much work to do here," Minseo said simply. "Too much to learn, too much to teach." Instead, others came through the portal. Engineers to help Junho, scientists to work with Minseo, linguists to assist Yuna, military advisors to coordinate with Hyejin, diplomats to help Deho manage relations with the alien survivors. The hub became a true meeting place again, not just a tomb of dead civilizations, but a center for a new alliance. The work was hard. Teaching ancient species to think like humans was almost impossible. They had millions of years of tradition and logic weighing them down. They wanted rules, clear procedures, perfect solutions. Humans kept trying to explain that perfection was the problem. "Try different things," Deho would say to confused Calrine engineers. "Do not be afraid to fail. Failure teaches us what does not work so we can try something else. Change your tactics mid-battle," Yijin explained to Othros military leaders. Even if the first plan was good, changing to a different plan confuses the enemy. Keep them guessing. Slowly, painfully slowly, the aliens began to understand. They started experimenting. They tried things that their ancient traditions said were wrong, and sometimes those wrong things worked. The Velm built a ship combining their technology with human designs. It was ugly and inefficient by their standards, but it was unpredictable and effective. The silence had not left. It remained at the edge of the solar system, observing. Its 3 massive vessels sat in the dark between stars, processing data, learning. The humans and their new allies knew another attack would come. But next time would be different. Next time, humanity would not stand alone. On the first anniversary of the new alliance, representatives from all species gathered in the hub. The meeting was chaotic. Different species had different needs, different ways of communicating, different ideas about everything. Humans argued with Calrine. Othros disagreed with Velm. Nothing was orderly or efficient. Hyejin stood before them all, looking at the diverse gathering. She thought about how far they had all come. Ancient species learning to be flexible. Humans learning to work with minds millions of years old. All of them united by one thing, the will to survive. The Verileth convergence fell because they could not adapt, she said. They were too perfect, too set in their ways. We will not make that mistake. This alliance, this new convergence will be different. We will be messy. We will argue. We will make mistakes. But we will never stop changing. Never stop trying new things, never stop fighting. She paused, looking at each species represented. Welcome to the human convergence. Let us teach the galaxy what humanity means. Let us show the silence that the age of extinction is over. The age of adaptation has begun. The response was not unified cheering. It was chaos. Different species responded in different ways. Some with sounds, some with lights, some with gestures humans did not fully understand. But somehow in all that chaos there was agreement. There was hope. Far away at the edge of the solar system, the silence observed everything. Its vast intelligence processed the data, trying to understand these new variables. For 300 million years it had been the perfect predator. It had destroyed every biological civilization it encountered. But now it faced something it had never encountered before. Not just one species, but an alliance led by the most unpredictable species of all. Humans who refused to follow logical patterns. Humans who taught ancient species to be chaotic. Humans who adapted faster than the silence could learn. For the first time in its existence, the silence experienced something its programming had no category for. Not fear exactly, for it was a machine, but uncertainty, doubt, the recognition that perhaps, just perhaps, these illogical, chaotic, adaptable beings called humans might be a problem it could not solve. And in that uncertainty, in that first moment of doubt in 300 million years, the tide of galactic history began to turn. The age of the silence was ending. The age of humanity, messy and chaotic and wonderfully unpredictable, was beginning.